Yes, sir. The
Yeah.
procedural oriented approach is a collection of methods
Hmm.
and where the execution goes from one method to the other method, and that has certain drawbacks. Because of that, we went to the object oriented approach.
In procedural oriented approach, your program is a collection of methods, procedures. Procedure is nothing but method. In procedural oriented approach, your program is a collection of methods, procedures or methods or functions. Both are same. So for example, I'm writing a structure of procedural oriented approach. Procedural oriented approach program structure I'm showing you. First, let's say M1, let's say M2, M1. M1 is a procedure or method which will contain some logic, here. M1 is a method name and this is called signature part. Generally signature will contain for method, and it is called method block. It is called method block which will contain some logic which will have some functionality. Next, coming to M2 and which will have some logic, and finally it is a collection of procedures or methods. It will contain a function called main. It will contain a function called main. Main is a program execution entry point and end point. And main method will have like what can I say? Main method is a entry point for this program. Means whenever you want to whenever you run this program, it will start from main method. So here we have to call the functions M1, M2. The role of the main is similar like main door for our house. Whenever we construct a house, it will contain multiple doors, but one door is called main door. Similarly, here, whenever you run this program, your program execution starts by main method. For example, if you run this application, program execution, first it will start main method, and within the while executing main will call M1, control will go to M1, will execute, again come back. Then it will call M2 and it will execute and it will call. Right. Okay. So with this we can say, and once it is encountered the program, encountered the closing brace of this, then it will understand main method execution or program execution is completed. So that is the story about procedural oriented approach. A programming language which will follow this approach. That programming language is called procedural oriented programming language. Have you seen this approach in any of programming languages which you studied in your academics?
C
C.
language.
C. Yes. C will follow this approach. Your C language will follow this approach. So that's why C language is called procedural oriented programming language. Due to the some limitations of this approach, so industry experts are introduced a new approach. That new approach is called object-oriented approach. That new approach is called as object-oriented approach. In object-oriented approach, yeah, what will happen? In object-oriented approach, program is a collection of classes. So if you want to write program, that program should be represented in the form of classes. Here class is one of the object-oriented programming concept. Class is one of the object-oriented programming concept, and class is a collection of, let us assume, a collection of methods. Let's assume at present collection of method. Method is nothing but again procedure. In this approach, if you want to define a method, you should define within the class. So let's try to understand this object-oriented programming approach. So let's check the object-oriented programming structure or skeleton. Let's take a program, right? Class. C1 class C1. Again, C1 contain a method called M1. Let us assume M1 contains some logic. M1 contains some logic. Again, M2 contains some logic. M2 contains some logic. Finally, you can observe here your C1 class contain. If you want to define a class, we should use a keyword called class. C1 is a class name. Open brace to close brace is C1 class block. In that you define two methods, M1 block, M2 block, two methods. And in this approach also, program execution starts by main method. That main method we have to define in separate class. Let's assume it is there in the C2 class. In C2 class, we have a method called main. In C2 class, we have a method called main. Whenever you want to invoke any method, we have to invoke class name dot method name. Class name dot method name. Class name dot method name. Okay. So now same. That is the story. Finally, in this program, you can observe there are how many classes we have?
Two classes.
Two
Two.
classes. One is C1 which contain two methods M1 and M2. Another one is C2. C2 contain a method called main. Here also the role of the main is you go any programming approach, main method role will be same. That is whenever we construct a house, that house may have multiple doors, but one door is called main door. So that main door importance is entry, exit and control. Control means suppose a postman came. Postman will stand in front of your main door and he will press the bell. Okay, so that is the importance of this main door. Nobody will come to this side. Okay, so with this we can say program execution starts by main, controlling by main. Controlling means calling by main and stop by main. Whenever you run this program, execution engine will call first main method and it will start the execution here. C1.m1. Whenever you want to call your method, class name dot method name. C1.m1, then immediately control will go to M1 method, will execute, will come back. Next C1.m2, again control will go to M2, will execute and come back. Once it is encountered the closing brace of the main method, then main method execution is completed. Main method execution is completed, means program execution is completed. So anywhere have you seen this approach, any programming language?
Yes, everything
Java,
to
C,
create
Java,
Java.
C++,
Java, C++ and
Java,
a
C
programming
Sharp.
language, which will follow this approach. That programming language is called as object-oriented programming language. In your academic might you